30s because I was working at a newspaper. I was in journalism at college, and I was so poor as a kid that the idea of becoming a novelist or any sort of artist seemed totally ridiculous to me and indulgent. Like, I remember being in college with people who were like, I'm going to be a novelist, and I would think, well, that's nice. That's very nice for you, isn't it? Don't expect me to buy you ramen. So I really wanted a car and health insurance. That was all I was about. I was a very exciting college senior. And journalism is a way for writers to get paid. Not anymore, but at the time. Don't pay the health insurance that way now. But at the time, it seemed like a very safe thing for me to do. So I did that for about 10 years. And while I was doing that, I really felt very itchy, and that's when I started my book Attachments. So, where were you in 2011?
And that was an adult book.
It was an adult book.
What was the adult publishing like? What's it like?
For me, I have no idea what it was like. I barely published that book. I mean, I didn't publish it at all, but very few people read that book, I'll be glad.
So
thank you. It was fine.
I mean, I think from the beginning, I read Attachments.
Thank you.
You really get at the truth of characters in all of your work.
Thank you.
And I wanted to ask you, how do you do that? How are you so good? How are you so good?
I don't know. Thank you, Holly.
I sent her all those questions, but this one.
No, she didn't send me that one. I like characters. That's what draws me to a story. So, when I'm watching the Buffy the Vampire Slayer is my second favorite. And I can't really tell you anything about the plot. To this day, I don't know what was in the Hellmouth. I can't figure out who was in charge. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if that was explained.
Better not to think about.
Okay. But the characters for me were just why I loved that show, and they were some of the greatest characters. So that's what I like in fiction. And so it's what I like to write, are characters. I never start with the plot, I start with the characters.
So you had Attachments, you sold Attachments.
Indeed.
Attachments came out, and then somewhere in there you started Eleanor Park.
I did, because in the UK, there was a situation where two publishers wanted Attachments, and one of them said, yeah, we'll take your next book too. And so I went with them in the UK, and then I had a year to write Eleanor Park. But actually, Attachments took so long to kind of work through that I ended up having like 6 months or 9 months to write Eleanor Park. And I didn't have an idea. So they were like, I remember my agent calling in saying, hey, do you have another book idea? And they said, no. And he said, well, could you? And I said, yeah. And he was like, would it be kind of like Attachments? And I said, sure. And I remember saying, I got this thing about like two kids and they're escaping to Minnesota. And he thought it was going to be like a funny romp road trip. Like really, I was just describing the last 10 pages of Eleanor Park. He was like, where's my road trip book? So I just wrote it for the UK, and it was actually published there more than a year before it ever came out here.
So, because I sent you a crazy email before. It was before I met you. I think we met like
we met once.
We were like in a car together and went to we had seen each other before. But after I read Eleanor Park, because I in the 80s was dating a guy who was half Asian, who wore guyliner, who was and in fact who is now my husband. So I sent her an email in which I attached my prom photo. Show because she was so cool. And I was like, I don't know you at all, but I love you. And I really feel like you were able to evoke what it felt like in the 80s, and specifically sort of racism that was directed at Asian men. And I was wondering, what attracted you to that story?
I don't know if this is how you write, but it's very difficult for me to, in the moment I can't explain to you why I'm writing something or where it came from. I sometimes feel like, have you ever watched an artist paint? They've got that big palette, and they aren't even looking at it sometimes, they're just like grabbing paint. And definitely when I was writing Eleanor Park, there was no intention. It was kind of like I had this vague idea, and I was kind of reaching back for memories. So in the time, I wasn't thinking, I'm going to address this. You know what I mean? I'm going to address, domestic violence and racism. Definitely, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking about the situation that I was in when I grew up, and the neighborhood that I lived in, the school that I went to. And so if I look back at that, I can, one of my best friends at that time was Chinese. And so I was just with him a lot, listening to him talk, listening to what he was worried about. I mean, he was not a quiet person. So whenever we're together, he'd be like, why won't Kristen go out with me? It's because she's so tall, So I, without intentionally thinking, I'm gonna write about Paul, or I'm gonna write about Scott, who let me read comic books, I think that I drew on those years and a lot of the guys who I was around at that time, including Paul.
So, can we talk about ambiguous endings?
Sure. Yeah. Ambiguous endings.
So what do you think is the value of an ambiguous ending?
Well, theoretically.
Theoretically.
I never think my endings are ambiguous. Like when people ask me about the ending of Eleanor Park, I feel like, yeah, I really sewed that up for you. I really just tied a bow around that and handed it to you. I mean, obviously. I always feel like when you're writing, okay, you're writing about young people. Their lives are going to go on and on and on. I don't matter how far away you hold the mic. It's very professional. I'm going to try to mimic that now. I always feel like, okay, people's lives are like this, and I'm only coming with them for one story arc. So with Eleanor Park, the story starts when they meet, and then they're having their life, they have all of this stuff together, and then something happens when she reaches out to him at the end. And for me, the ending is she reached out to him. That was the question, not what the postcard said, not whether they're going to get together, but did she reach out? Thank you. I would like you guys to respond to the tweets I get at 2 a.m. that are like, what did you just do? So I feel like there was a real chance that Eleanor she wanted to keep that relationship under glass and keep it perfect. And there was a chance she was never going to reach out. So I think the fact that she did, and then he was happy. He smiled. Something wicked took off from his chest.
So do you know what the words are?
I do, and I think if I told you, you'd be like, yeah, sure, that's something people say. All the magic would be gone, because I told one person at my first event. She was so lovely that I told her, and I leaned over, and the look on her face was just like, oh. Like, never again.
That person really did a number on us.
She should have wept.
So I read somewhere that you finished Fangirl during NaNoWriMo, is that true?
I didn't finish it, but I did finish NaNoWriMo, so I wrote 50,000 words. So you win. You only have to write 50,000 words to win. Yeah. And Fangirl's 115,000 words, 110. So I wrote it, but I will say everything I wrote during that month I kept. Like, I thought that I was just piling up trash words, but no, I kept them all. I recommend it. Yeah.
So you've talked a little bit in interviews about reading Sherlock fan fiction and Harry Potter fan fiction. So how did you come to fan fiction?
There's nothing like better in a huge room full of people than admitting that I read fan fiction. Sherlock especially.
If you didn't, I mean, you were too for research.
No, I did for research. Self-analysis. Yes. Well, I came to fan fiction through the Harry Potter fandom, and actually, Harry Potter a lot, Holly. You'll get tons of applause. And basically, what happened is I was late to online fandom because I was too broke to buy a computer for a very long time in that period. So Harry Potter fandom was born on the internet, and I wasn't there. But for the longest time, so the books ended, and many people were very sad. But there were still movies. So I kind of felt like, well, I don't have to be sad because there are still movies. And then they started breaking up the movies into 3 to 4 parts, or the books, And I felt like, this is going to go on forever. Every Christmas we'll have a new Harry Potter movie. So I walked out of the last one just so anxious. So I need what? Yeah. More. It's over. It can't be over. It can't be over. They're just getting cute. It can't be over. And I literally in the car Googled best Harry Potter fanfiction on the way home. Yeah. What was it? Well, that's a long long list. If you type in best Harry Potter fanfiction, you're not going to get one answer. You're going to get 60,000 hits, you know. So that's what I did, and that kind of led to Fangirl, because I started thinking about like fandom and fanfiction, especially. I was like, this is the best. This is where I would have been as a teenager. I would have never left my room. I would have been so into fanfiction, writing it, reading it, and then I wrote Fangirl. Thank you.